Hey, it's Captain House here, and we're going to go over some features and maintenance of an Okuma Avenger reel. These are relatively inexpensive reels, and I get them on Amazon in the $30 to $45 range, something like that. They have some pretty neat features. I was turned on to these by Zoffinger, Marty over there. He's got a kayak fishing channel that's pretty cool, and I suggest you go over and take a look at it. I use these reels on all of my rigs now, and because I'm so impressed with them. I fish probably about 3 times a week in saltwater, and these hold up really well, but you do have to maintain them. You know, they're just like any other piece of mechanical equipment. When you use it that much, and especially in a corrosive liquid like salt water, you're going to want to make sure it's greased properly and that it works properly. One of the cool features of this reel, though, is this bait feeder option. I won't go really into it a whole lot, but other than it's a secondary drag, kind of like a conventional reel. You flip that up, and then it's a real loose drag, so you can set your rods in your rod holders and wait for a fish to take your bait, and you know, they'll run off with it. You can flip that down or turn the reel, and it will engage, and then your primary drag will then engage, which is pretty cool. Really impressed for the price. You know, and like, they make different sizes. This is the 30, so which is, in my opinion, about as big as you want to go for a, you know, a standard medium to light action rig, because you're going to be tossing this thing up quite a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to dismantle it and grease it. This one fell in. This one took a dive. I was able to recover it, and I just kind of wanted to see, you know, what, if any, did it seal, did the seals hold and everything else. There's not any problems with it. I don't feel any grinding or anything. I mean, it was submerged for a good 5 minutes. I was able to retrieve it, which was cool, but it was in salt water for about 5 minutes, completely submerged. So anyhow, to get started, I'm going to just go over some of the tools that I have, and you can use these tools, you know, do any reel maintenance. Let's go over them real quick. This is a pretty handy thing. I think it's about $5 at Home Depot. It's got all the different bits in there, and this has everything in it that you need to dismantle a fishing reel. Can of compressed air. That's really handy. Blow sand and stuff out. Some eyeglass cleaner. This is basically alcohol, rubbing alcohol and water mixed together. This is corrosion block. Stuff is kind of expensive. This little can here is about $11-12. It'll last you over a year though, and it's by far the best corrosion block lubricant that I've found. I get it at Ace Hardware. Excellent buy. Some Penn reel grease. This stuff is excellent. It's the best quality reel grease that you can buy on the market right now. You're going to need somewhere to put your screws. A little cup. A pair of needle nose pliers is always really handy to have. A cup of coffee, and a couple of Q-tips are really useful for the grease. And last but not least, a roll of paper towel. First thing to do is get a good clean working space here. I'm going to take the drag and loosen it all the way up until it comes off. It'll keep clicking, and you can just pull it off. Set that over there. Pull the spool off. This has some older braid on it, but it's still good. And the next thing you're going to see is the shaft. We're going to take and spin out the screw that holds in the reel, and we're actually going to take the spool, the bail off, and we're going to grease all this. And in order to do that, you actually have to pull this. There's a plastic washer down there, and to get underneath it, you gotta use your very tiny flathead to pry up on it. Now this is not something you want to go quickly on. You want to kind of do this slowly. You want to just loosen this up, turn the bail, pop the bail. Just go slow, because it is plastic. And then once it gets to a certain point, you can kind of pull the whole thing up. Get that loose. And then the whole thing comes out, pops off in your hand. And just take note, you've got a small washer down there. You got like a little pinion gear thing and the plastic piece, and they're all stuck together right now because they have grease on them. I'm just going to leave them in that position. I'm going to grab a Phillips head bit, swap this out, and we're going to pull this screw out right here. All that screw does is keep this nut right here from turning out. And something to consider when you're turning these out, this particular nut out, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey does not apply here, okay? You actually have to righty-loosey here. So go ahead and just take your needle nose and righty-tighty. But it's righty-loosey. Kind of, if you've done any sort of work like this before, it'll kind of mess with your head a little bit. And you just want to be aware of that when you go to put it back together, because you'll be spinning this thing in the wrong direction and it won't go back on. Alright, so we're going to put that there. And at this point, the bail is going to lift right off. Okay, no big deal. We can take this bail apart. This one feels okay. Keep in mind, when you take this thing apart, you'll want to, I don't know how to put this gently, but it's difficult to get. There's a spring-loaded component in here. And if you pull this apart, just be aware that you're going to probably play with it for a little while before you get it all back together, okay? And we're not going to do that here because it feels fine to me, and we're going to lubricate it. We'll probably do that right now. Take some of our corrosion block, and we're just going to spritz it into that seam and work it in a little bit. That's the extent of what I'm going to do today on the bail, because it feels fine. There's also another little, there's like a little engage pin down here that when you go to pop the reel or turn the reel, it engages and pops the reel, which you shouldn't do, by the way. You should do it by hand when you're fishing. You should do it by hand when you're fishing. Okay, so we're going to take and set the bail over there. We're pretty much done with that. Now we're left with a couple of components here. I can sort of feel some saltiness in here, some grit. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this cover off, because there's a bearing underneath this little cover. 3 Phillips head screws to pull this apart. Nothing's going to pop out at you when you do this. Nothing's going to fly out. It's just holding it all together here. Pull this off. Okay. Now this is where the grease comes into play. Take your Q-tip, dip it in your grease, spin it in there a little bit, and you got a tip of grease. And you're going to line this. There's a bearing in there. You can go further if you want and pull that whole scenario out. Just be aware that you've got this spring to deal with, and this to do the to turn that backwards. I wouldn't go that far unless the reel was really mangled or something. And then here's the other thing that you should be doing right here, is you should be greasing the shaft as well. Okay. And when I put grease on, I'll grab my crank here and I'll start to just work it in a little bit. Get it in there, work it down in there. Not a lot gets down in there, it kind of gets cleaned off as you're doing this. but as you're spinning it, you're spinning the bearing too, and the bearing's going up and down, and I can already feel it loosen up a little bit, okay, which is nice. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll spritz some corrosion block on the spring and then down inside of my direction switch here, just to make sure that that's all lubricated and good. Alright, so we're going to pull off this this switch here for the secondary drag, or the bait feeder. Back that screw out, and you're going to use your pliers, switch this up, take your pliers and pry off. Okay, that piece goes there, and then you've got 4 screws holding on the side panel. Okay, now be aware when you take this apart, there is a rubber seal that goes all the way around the interior portion of this panel. So you kind of want to be gentle when you're pulling this thing apart, okay? Because you don't want to break that seal. You want to be really gentle with that. Or you don't want to break the rubber, I should say. And you can see there's the rubber, the black rubber seal around there. And it's still intact, and there's no water in there. I'm super impressed. The quality of these reels is, for the cost, is pretty unbelievable. Okay, so one thing I do see is kind of a lack of grease in there, and so we're going to go ahead and grease this thing all up. That's where your Q-tip comes into place. You're going to want to just shove grease down into some of the areas there that you can get in, any of the gears, anything that looks like it's moving. It should have grease on it. You really can't mess this up. I mean, I wouldn't load this or pack this full of grease. I would make sure though that every little spot that you can get some grease on gets a little grease, because you got a bearing here that should have some grease on it. You have a spring there, and then you have your secondary drag, and the secondary drag's plastic, and so we're going to go ahead and spritz some corrosion block in there, and then we're going to take our crank and we're going to spin this thing, and so we're going to move the mechanism down and then add more grease. Okay, moving the mechanism. That way you can get some good coverage. And this is going to feel funny when you do this, okay, because the reel is not in alignment right now, so it's going to feel like it's grinding while you're doing that, and that's because this whole situation is loose. Okay, you just want to be careful while you're doing this, and it's going to feel like it's grinding a little bit. Okay, that's totally normal. When you reassemble it, it's not going to do that any longer. Okay. Alright, so the last piece of this puzzle is I like to put some grease along my seal point. Okay, so wherever this rubber seal right here is, I'm placing some pen reel grease on it. Okay, and anybody knows how that works. It's grease tends to act like a sealant. It's almost like caulk, and it can keep your reel from being flooded on the inside. Alright, so let's put this thing back together. Okay. At this point, your hands are probably covered in some grease. Okay, which is totally fine. And I actually take a little bit of my corrosion block, spritz it in each screw hole. Okay. I have my theories about this corrosion block, by the way. I think it's partially coconut oil. It smells like coconut oil anyhow. It never stings my hands or anything when I'm using it, which is pretty cool. Okay, and then I like to take and dip my screws ever so slightly in grease. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, it helps seal the screw hole again, and secondly, it holds my screw in place so they're not going to fall out while I'm working. one. So there's a couple of reasons for that. And then we go ahead and tighten these back down. And all 4 panel screws are completely interchangeable. There is no difference in any of those screws, okay? So don't worry about that. And as you're tightening, grease should be pouring out of those seams, which is kind of what you want, because you want that grease to settle down in there. Okay. All right, good deal. Now we're going to just start reassembling here. We're going to put our top panel back on. Nice and even there. Let's see, we've got our screws. Hold that in. Doing this, I wouldn't tighten everything down straight away. I would, oops, this is the wrong screw. A couple of those screws look the same, okay, so I want to kind of be careful of that. But just tighten these down just enough to keep them in place. Don't do a full tighten on those top 3 until you've got them all in there, okay, and then you'll go around and tighten them one by one. So that's that one, now that one is tight, okay. She's already feeling much looser, and I'm going to go ahead, now that I've got it somewhat back together, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a quick spin here. That's good. Feels nice. And we're going to put our secondary, our bait feeder option back on. It's going to be a little tricky, but pretty easy. And like I said, I'm really impressed with the components of this reel for, you know, between 30 and 50 bucks. I mean, you can get you can spend a whole lot more on reels that are actually going to fall in the water and get lost. I'm a commercial fishing captain, and my clients never complain. They, you know, as long as I maintain these reels, they're gonna give back to us and not cause a problem. And everybody's super impressed with that bait feeder option as well. So I mean, that's something a lot of my clients have never seen before, which is pretty cool. Okay, so we are getting closer to full-on reassembly. And remember what I said about this nut: righty-tighty is not tighty. You've got to go backwards on this. So this is going to be a little bit screwball at first, and when you get this, you'll get kind of used to it after you've done a few of them. But I still don't ever get used to them. And they do that because they don't want the nut to back off on you while you're spinning this thing. That's the whole idea. Hand tighten, and then I use my needle nose. Final turn there, and then we put our backing screw back into it. It's just a screw to hold the nut in place. Again, I check this as I'm putting things back together. I'll be checking how it works the whole way. This is another spot I like to add grease. This is another entry point. There's bearings in there that can get wet if you drop it. So just go ahead and sandwich some pin grease in there. Okay. Tighten that down. Oh yeah. Yeah, feels good. Alright, now I'm going to spritz a little bit of this corrosion block on there. Yeah. Okay, great. And our last little component here, this has got to go on in a specific way. It won't go on any other way. There's a little groove in there, so you got to line it up with the flat side. And once you do that, it gets in there pretty tight. It should slide right down into place. Okay. Alright, and put our primary drag back on. And now you're probably wondering, why the heck did Brian say to put on some of this, to have some of this glasses cleaner available? This is why. I like to clean up with a little bit of alcohol and water at the end to get all the grease off the outside of the reel. Okay, and alcohol evaporates quickly and it cleans as it works. Okay, so now we've got it cleaned up. Everything's back together. Again, like I said, I would highly suggest these for any fisherman, fresh or saltwater. Okuma did a great job engineering this thing. There's many different sizes available. You can go as big as you want. I have a shark rig that is actually ABF 90. This thing is monstrous. And I've caught 250-pound sharks on it. This I've reeled in, 30-inch redfish, big jack, big snook. I put 20-pound braid, Power Pro braid on them. They're just a workhorse reel. You do have to maintain these reels, though. I mean, this is not something that you're gonna want to just throw back in your boat and let sit out in the salty air and stuff like that. There are components on here that will degrade with salt water, and you want to just make sure that those are clean and rinsed off at the end of the day when you're done fishing. This reel has probably seen, I don't know, a couple hundred fish, I'm guessing. This reel has been in service close to 2 years now, and it was the first ABF 90 or ABF 30 that I actually bought. And per Marty over at Zoffinger's recommendation, he did a whole video on it, and I was just I figured, what do I have to lose? The reel is $30, and I'm gonna go ahead and try it. I was so impressed with it that I put it on every one of my rigs, including my big shark rigs and stuff like that, because clients do actually drop these in the water, and sometimes they're not recovered. Put that in perspective. If I'm taking somebody fishing and they drop a $300 Penn reel into the water, my profit margin on the trip just went to zero. So, as long as you maintain them and keep them clean, you're gonna get a really good life out of these reels. Thanks for watching. Please like and please subscribe. Also go over and check out Zoffinger, Zoffinger. His name is Marty. He's an amazing fisherman. He's up near Sarasota, I think, Tampa, or I think it's in Tampa, or maybe it's St. Pete Beach. I can't remember. Anyhow, he's up there, and he has an excellent channel, and I'm always looking forward to his videos. So go subscribe to him as well.